So here we are at Module 2, Open Communication, what it is, and how to do it the right way. So I think the best place to start here is understanding what is communication. I mean, you hear the word communication and you might think a million things. You hear the term communications and you think, I don't know, news, broadcasting, people who are in the business of communicating information to you. But we're going to talk about this obviously on a much different scale, much deeper scale. We're talking personal communication. So, first, I want to read you the definition of communication. It is the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs. I mean, that's pretty straightforward if you think about it. It's a way of getting information from one person to another. Now, I want to talk for a minute about why communication is so important. It's really simple. Nobody can read your mind. Now, of course, you may know people who are potentially psychics, people who claim they can read minds, and maybe some people can, but ultimately, if there are people who can, the vast majority of us can't. Therefore, communication is important because if someone can't tell what you're thinking, how are they supposed to know what you're thinking? This is a huge issue in relationships. Think about it. So often, you or your partner may expect, well, we've been together so long and I always react the same way to a certain situation, or my answer is always the same. Why don't they know this by now? And that's an easy trap to fall into. It's really, really easy to fall into this trap of, well, they should know me well enough to not have to ask or to know how to respond or to know what I'm going to say and all of those things. And while, yeah, maybe there is some truth to that, maybe there is some validity to your partner should know you really well, the fact of the matter is they can't read your mind. Only you know what's happening in your brain, and only your partner knows what's happening in their brain. The only way for anyone to know what anyone else is thinking is sharing your thoughts. And that right there is communication. Okay, so that's the basic. That is simply communicating, telling someone what you're thinking, how you're feeling, what you expect of them. Okay, now when we break this down a little bit more, okay, same goes for your partner. It's a two-way street, right? It's not just you. You're not the only one who is responsible for communicating. Your partner has to communicate equally. It's very important in relationships to have open communication. Now, when we talk about open communication, actually, let me back up for 1 second and say you have to keep in mind. I think I already said it, but I just want to emphasize it. Communication is a two-way street, right? If you are not communicating your thoughts, your feelings, your anything really that's going on in here, if you're not communicating that to them, you cannot expect them to know what it is that you're thinking or feeling or your thoughts on anything. Okay, that is ultra important. So you have to be willing to communicate. You have to be willing to step out of your they should know shoes and into your I'm willing to communicate what I think they should know already. But they have to be willing to do the same. And you have to be willing to receive the information and not just share the information. Let's talk now for a second. That was, basic communication. But what's open communication? So open communication takes communication a step further. And open communication is really, really all about no judgment. Just no judgment. Keeping your judgments and thoughts to yourself. It is effective. Okay, open communication is a very effective tool in a healthy relationship. And it's really all about transparent communication, being honest, not being afraid to be truthful with your partner. And this also is a trap that people fall into frequently, the fear of being honest with your partner. Now, I get it to a point. I can understand being honest can be really scary. I know that. We all know that. But in a relationship, right? A relationship should be 50-50. It's give and take. You both give as much as you receive, okay? That is equally important with communication. You have to be able to be transparent about your communication. You can't hide, let me kind of rephrase that. You can't hide behind your fear of being truthful, because what's that going to do for your relationship? Relationships, like I said, they're about give and take, but they're also about honesty. If you're not being honest in your relationship, how healthy can your relationship possibly be? Think about that for a second. It is that simple. If you are not being honest, your relationship cannot thrive. It just can't. It cannot thrive. You need to be honest in order to have a healthy relationship, okay? One of the things that I think is really important to talk about here is how to cultivate this healthy, open communication in your relationship. If you haven't spent your relationship being honest and open with each other, now's the time to get on that. How to do it? Practice. Practice with anything makes perfect. Practice communicating. Practice being honest. If you're afraid of telling your partner how you're feeling, so let's kind of give an example. If you and your partner are disagreeing about something, but you're not being honest about why you're in disagreement, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand why you don't agree, and vice versa. It's all about being honest about how you feel, being in touch with your own emotions, knowing how you feel about things, and not being afraid of that honesty and not being afraid to share that with your partner. It can be scary. I'm not going to ever sit here and tell you it's not scary. It is, but it's extremely important. So I want you to practice this. And the best way to practice is to get your partner involved. Okay. So what I want you to do is schedule a time each week. Every week, you're just going to have a set time to yourselves where you're going to sit down with your partner and talk. And we're going to set some ground rules in just a second, but it's important to note this doesn't have to be like every week on Friday at 4 p.m. We're going to sit down for exactly 10 minutes and 30 seconds. No. What you do need is to say, okay, every week we're going to pick a day because, I mean, let's face it, every week is different. Every day is different in everyone's life. No matter how monotonous your life is, it's going to be different from week to week and day to day. So you pick a day each week. It might be the same day, and that's fine. But you just pick a day and a time that works for you to sit down. I would say you probably want to carve out at least 20 minutes for this exercise. But this is going to be different depending on, your particular relationship. It might be a little bit longer, it might be a little bit shorter, but I absolutely would not go under 10 minutes. And what you're going to do is set your ground rules. No judgment, no talking until the other person is finished talking. That's going to be the most important thing. We'll get back to that in a minute. And no criticism about the other person's thoughts and feelings. So let's break these down for a second. No judgment. Okay? Put your judgments out of this exercise. There's no judgment here. You can judge in your mind because you can't really shut off your thoughts, and that's okay. No one would expect you to. But don't voice your judgment. If you think in your mind, well, that is just ridiculous. I can't believe that they would even think that. Keep that to yourself. Make a mental note of it. But don't say anything and don't make any faces. And when I say don't make any faces, I mean don't be like this. Okay, you get the point. Okay, no judgment. No talking until the other person is finished talking. That is important. It's really, really difficult when you're having a serious conversation and you're working on communication and one person is talking. It's really difficult to keep your mouth shut. I know that. I know that from personal experience. I like to talk. It's very hard for me to hold my thoughts back. But in order for this to be successful, you really need to make a point to let the other person, your partner, finish their thoughts. So no talking until they are done talking. Now, that doesn't mean that, one person gets to talk for 20 minutes and the other person gets 1 minute. You need to make sure that it's equal here. But don't interrupt until the other person is done. And then the last thing I said was no criticism. And this goes back to the no judgment. You're not judging the other person on their feelings, because feelings and emotions are very personal and they are what they are. But that's the same thing with no criticism. When it's your turn to talk, don't say, well, you said this and I don't like that, and you did this and you did that. No, it is really listening to the other person, understanding their thoughts, understanding their feelings, accepting them, and then deciding what you're going to do with that after. It's not about, okay, you tell me how you feel and I'm going to tell you what you said and how that made me feel. That'll come later. But for now, this practice is simply practicing talking to each other, practicing communicating with each other. Something that I want to emphasize here before we finish up is everybody's different, right? And even though every healthy relationship has open communication, the way you communicate might not be typical. So typical communication is talking, conversation. But sometimes that's really hard, and that's okay. I am never going to be the person to tell you you have to talk. If you don't like to talk or it's really difficult for you, that's okay. Have a text conversation on your phone or email your partner. That's a good way to start. It's okay to feel like talking is difficult for you. That, for me, the most important thing is that you're getting your thoughts out there, however you're doing that. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a conversation. I'm going to say that's not necessarily more advanced, but if that's what you're comfortable with, go for it. If you're not comfortable and you need to write it down or text message with your partner or email with your partner, that's okay. Over time, you might find that I'm going to use the word evolve. You evolve into conversation. It's all about what's comfortable for both of you. So make sure before you even start this exercise, make sure that you both know what you're comfortable with and you're in agreement. Okay? I want you to do that exercise, practice, 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 and over time, communication, I promise you, will become easier. All right? I got module 4 coming up next. Why what you think should not always equal what you do. I'll see you there.